What's up everyone, welcome back to another What If video. We love having a bit of a cliffhanger, so of course we were going to continue with another part. Last time, we saw the encounter with Stain and how that went for everyone. But on top of that, we got to see how Gohan's internship went, which led us to the conclusion of the last part, and the introduction of a brand new character. Once he's healed up at the hospital, Gohan will finally get to meet Roshi's former student like they first planned. For this episode, let's set a like goal of 2,500 likes, and if we hit that, we'll continue the story with another part. And with all that out of the way, let's pick up from here. Goku's pretty shocked to hear Gohan bring up Krillin. He hasn't really seen him in a while. While the two of them did train to be pro-heroes, Krillin ended up becoming a cop for certain reasons, while Goku obviously went on to become a hero himself. So they really don't see each other too much anymore, but they're still good friends. The reason Krillin decided to become a cop is because as a hero, he felt his quirk wasn't too useful. Well, it was too useful. It was very deadly to use. With the way his quirk works, it's very destructive, as Goku explains, and if he were to use it in a high action battle like against a villain, he might accidentally hurt someone, or even worse, kill them. Collateral damage is also a huge issue. He is able to use his quirk for smaller applications, which is why now he uses it for rescue, but when used on a wider scale, it is far too dangerous for him to use as a hero. But he's perfectly content where he is now, and he feels this is for the better. We'll get more into this once we meet him. Once Gohan finally heals up, he goes back to Roshi for the remainder of the week, and they go and see Krillin. Good thing is they're already in Hosu City, so they're not too far, and Krillin of course would hear about this issue being a cop and all. Now for his design I wasn't really too sure what to go with, so I just gave him a casual look based on his Buu Saga design instead, with his shorter hair from Battle of Gods. If we see any more of him in this What If, you'll get to see him in his cop outfit doing whatever he does, utilizing his technique which is called Kienzan. This quirk allows him to create discs of energy, which can cut through almost anything depending on how long he charges them. That's one of the reasons he trained with Roshi and why Roshi took Gohan here, since he had to learn how to regulate his energy in multiple different ways, such as how much he was using, how it would be concentrated, and where it would fly to once he launches it. And this is kind of why he's scared of it. When used in a fight, he would have to rely on destroying stuff around him in order to subdue an enemy. In a forest or some remote setting, this would be very useful, but since a lot of the fights take place in cities, he can't just go around destroying stuff willy-nilly. And if he were to throw one of these discs directly at someone, it's gonna kill them. And as a hero, even if he's fighting a villain, that's not just something that he's gonna do. There is also the concern about collateral damage. However, his quirk is very useful in rescue situations, like if a building collapses and someone is trapped under rubble, he can use it to slice down rubble or free someone from a car or something. Also, since he'll be fighting lower level villains as a cop, he won't have to worry about moving around as much, and he can use his quirk kind of as a shield in case someone's shooting at him or something. Normally with a villain he wouldn't be able to do this because he'd have to move around and potentially break stuff, but given that he might be a lot more stationary here, it will really help him. I imagine it kind of like how he acts as a cop in Dragon Ball Super. But Gohan came to the right place because Krillin is able to give him some tips and show him some pointers as to how he can control his energy more properly. In order to regulate the output of his technique and where it would fly to, it took a lot more effort for him because of how deadly his technique was and how important it was for him to control it with precision. The good thing with Gohan is that his quirk has multiple purposes, and he doesn't need to worry too much about precision when fighting, so his training shouldn't be nearly as intensive. Krillin and Roshi work together in order to teach Gohan techniques to regulate his power. Before all this training, he couldn't regulate his electricity that well, but now he's able to concentrate with it much better. Roshi remembers that beam that Gohan created during the tournament, and suggests that Gohan tries to use that as a signature technique since it's something he already knows and taught himself. He can refine it more and it can turn into an iconic hero move, and since he trained under the Turtle Hermit, Roshi decides to give him a name inspired by the Turtle School, the Kamehameha. Bonus points if you could figure out where that name comes from. The reference to the term Kamehameha may be a little bit obscure. Jokes aside, they even try to test it and see how it can regulate his output, wondering if he could potentially output higher levels of electricity right now. They ask him to test this out so they could figure out what his maximum output is, at least to the point where he can't hurt himself. He begins using his quirk and letting out some energy, trying to hold it in so it doesn't fly all over the place. He's able to regulate it pretty well, and tries turning it up even though it is a bit painful, but it's nothing excessive and he just wants to see what his limit is right now before it hurts too much. As he releases more and more electricity, his output intensifies and his hair even stands up a bit, coating him in an electrified aura, although it's becoming more apparent that he's not able to control it at this level. Roshi and Krillin are amazed at how quickly he progressed, and they think it's fine if he stops now, but Gohan wants to go a little bit further and see how high it can go. He lets out a little bit more electricity, and this is where he loses control. For a brief second, the electricity surges, and he outputs a huge amount of power, followed by him passing out from it. Roshi and Krillin rush over and it seems like he's actually fine, and they're both pretty impressed with him but also terrified about the power he showed. When he was outputting this electricity, for a brief second when it spiked, it was to a point where he was even glowing a bit, as his hair spiked even further and was illuminated by the electricity itself, almost as if his appearance changed due to the electricity. The good thing is, with this training, this will work with the other part of his quirk, and hopefully he'll see some rapid growth. After the rest of his training completes, he goes back to school with this successful training in mind. He gets to show off some of what he learned during the rescue training test, and overall it seems like he's getting more and more used to using his quirk. And as a bonus for mobility, he begins trying to emulate the way Deku jumps around, as well as trying to utilize his tail for maneuvers and picking up stuff. I mean, it's essentially an extra limb, and utilizing his tail while moving around allows him to pull off some pretty cool maneuvers, you know, like swinging from his tail like a monkey. He thinks it looks pretty goofy, but it's pretty useful at the same time, so he doesn't really question it. It becomes apparent that with everyone's internships, they've all improved greatly, and Gohan is no exception. This leads us to the final week of class in June, with exams happening. In the written portion, of course, he'll do very well, but then there's the practical portion when they're fighting against the teachers. To keep things simple here, since Gohan replaced Hagakure in the class, we're going to say he replaces her in other areas as well, so he'd most likely be paired up with Shoji here, fighting against Snipe. While the teachers could have paired him with a different student, the issue was that he already knew how to work with some other people, so they decided to pair him with someone that he hasn't really worked with before. And this works out pretty well because he learns to improvise here. Unlike some of the other students, he hasn't ever worked with Shoji before, and they are actually able to work pretty well together. Sadly, we don't really know too many details about how this fight went or where it took place, so I can't go too in depth about it. However, with Shoji's great reconnaissance, combined with the power and mobility of Gohan, the two of them most likely would be able to work well together and pass this. Sadly, the same can't be said for everyone else in the class, because some people do fail their exams. And of course, this means that they're going to be going to training camp in the summer. As for the next few chapters, there's not much that would change here because it focuses mostly on other battles during the exams, or it just focuses on Deku's encounter with Shigaraki. So before the summer camp begins, let's actually talk about Bakugo for a bit. As you saw in the last few parts, he's been kind of changing in terms of character, ever so slightly though. Given how far behind he feels from everyone, and how he's increasingly losing motivation, his exam with Deku and the prospect of a training camp actually gives him a second wind. While he still has his more abrasive personality, he's a little bit mellowed out here, and seems to be more open to working with others. This second wind helps him as he gets more motivated to train, promising Todoroki, Gohan, and Deku that he will come out on top, giving them a challenge that is both competitive, but also a bit friendly, as he hopes to see them improve too. Although he's going to work a little bit independently towards this goal, hoping to surpass everyone else. And thus, the training begins. After everyone arrives at the camp, they find out about what their training will be like. Similar to Gohan's training with Roshi and Krillin, his training will be much more intense here, and he'll be using his electricity to points where it might even hurt him, trying to improve his limits and work with his Zenkais pretty gradually, and also trying to improve his output with less food. Not only is he looking at power here, he's looking at efficiency and control, basically trying to improve every aspect of his quirk. Because of the food aspect, his training would probably be a little bit similar to Momo's in that aspect, because both of them involve trying to use food more effectively. He also practices that technique from before, the Kamehameha, and he applies what he learned from that technique to other attacks. He gets much more better at focusing his electricity over time. Later at night, they plan those games and training exercises that they had for the students originally, but naturally, this leads to villains attacking, and there would be some minor changes here. As for Deku, he'd still be with Koda like normal. But since we're covering Gohan here, that doesn't really affect this story too much and I'm going to gloss over that. Gohan most likely would be with Ida, Ojiro, and Koda. Wait, that pronunciation's kinda similar. Koda with a D, not Kota with a T. Anyways, yeah, Gohan's gonna be with them, which would mean they're gonna make it back to camp. And they're gonna stick with Aizawa for a bit, pretty much being guarded alongside the other students stuck inside. While they're in here, Mandalay then gives the signal to everyone through telepathy, telling them to fight back, saying they have permission to engage in combat with the villains. Sadly, although this is a little bit anticlimactic, this would mean Gohan is barred from fighting because he's stuck with the group inside. He, Ida, and everyone else at the camp would want to fight, but the teachers would stop them from going out, saying that it's safer in here. They really do want to help and try and face the villains, but it seems like that's not happening. Especially once the building is broken into, it makes the students want to fight even more, but Aizawa makes it clear that they can't at any cost. While they're all inside, the fights on the outside go pretty similar to normal, except there is one extra villain there. They can't really see him though. Whenever he attacks, they see his arm, but seemingly nothing is attached to that arm, almost like he's attacking from a distance, punching and grabbing stuff. or swiping at them with claws. It's too dark to see him, because when they see his hand, it looks almost as if it's attached to an arm that extends infinitely. And this comes into play later, because when the villains make their escape through the portal, the students are almost able to save Bakugo, but at the very last second, he's grabbed by that extending arm, pulled into another portal nearby. Deku watches as Bakugo is dragged into the portal, with Bakugo telling everyone to stay back. A clawed, green hand is holding onto his neck, as Dabi and the other villains enter the portal too. The portal closes, and all the villains are gone. Unbeknownst to everyone on the inside, Bakugo is kidnapped. Everyone finds out later. Some people are injured, and one person is missing. Gohan really wishes he could have been on the outside to help, and Ida the same. They were in the wrong place at the wrong time, because it led to them not being able to intervene. Ida knows that they do have to obey the teachers, but Gohan internally questions whether that was a good idea. This will come into play later. Visiting Deku at the hospital, Kirishima then suggests that everyone should try and save Bakugo. At first, he's met with scrutiny, as people disagree with him and tell him that's a bad idea. Ida obviously would say that the suggestion is bad, and they should just leave it to the pro heroes. But Kirishima gets heated, and tells everyone that he's serious about saving Bakugo. One of the first people to actually speak up with Kirishima is Gohan, which seems kinda unlike him. Normally, Gohan would be cool-headed and rational, but he's actually agreeing with Kirishima here. Since he regrets not being able to help save Bakugo earlier, he wants to actually try now and make up for it. And even if they're not legally allowed to do so, he doesn't care. He feels this is the right thing to do. Later that night, people meet up, and there are a few that are interested in saving Bakugo. But naturally, Ida shows up as well to protest and try and protect his friends. They're all glad that he's concerned, and they understand where he's coming from. Ida thinks they're going to be rash about it and go in guns blazing, trying to fight every villain they see and save Bakugo. But they clarify here that he's wrong, and they actually have a good plan to do this safely. Ida is surprised and kind of relieved to hear this, and decides to listen to what they have to say. He realizes he can't persuade them, so he decides to join them, as they begin to further strategize about how they'll save Bakugo. And this is where we'll leave off for now. So, who is that new villain? Well, I think it's pretty obvious, but ooh, mystery. Who could this character possibly be? Also, how do you think Krillin will come into play in the future? Will Gohan be able to further master his power? And will they all be able to save Bakugo? Leave your thoughts and suggestions in the comments below, and I'll be sure to check them out to see what you guys think. As usual, if you like this video, be sure to drop a like, and let's try to hit our like goal to see if we can get another part. And if you haven't already, why not subscribe, as well as hitting the bell icon to get notified about any future parts of this What If, or any other videos that I upload on my channel. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you on my next video.